Are you a parking ticket? Because you've got fine written all over you, he said. Excuse me, she said, coffee cup midway to her mouth. Aiden started again. Is your dad a boxer? Because you're a knockout. Mary's eyes and brows furrowed at him in disbelief. She sipped her coffee, gearing up for her response. Seeing that the line did not hook her, he continued. Are you a campfire? Because you're hot and I want some more. Mary snorted in her coffee. He watched as coffee sputtered out on the table. She put her cup down before preparing her retort. If you were a transformer, you'd be Optimus Fine. This time Aiden could see she wasn't going to bite. This is how he imagined it would be. 15 minutes ago, Aiden Cho, 27, had already been wrestling with the sophomore slump of his writing career, staring at his blank cursor on his laptop screen. The cafe sounds had faded into irrelevance as his writer's block pressed down on his temples like a physical weight. The prompt had been simple: write a story about a fateful meeting, and yet nothing. He had run a hand through his dark hair, sighed, and was about to close the lid when the bell above the door chimed, cutting through the jazz playlist. The woman who walked in was the kind of distraction that felt less like a nuance and more like divine intervention. She was a brunette with a cascade of freshly curled brown hair that caught the diffuse morning light like polished mahogany. She wore a simple cream turtleneck and carried a worn leather-bound book. Their eyes met, a fleeting electric collision across the crowded cafe. Aiden, the author perpetually lost in fiction, felt reality briefly snap into focus. There was a challenge in her gaze, a deep curiosity that mirrored his own. She broke the connection first, stepping toward the counter. While she waited for her order, their eyes met again, briefly before she looked away. When her coffee arrived, she deliberately chose a small, unoccupied table in direct line of sight, close enough to notice, far enough to require courage. Aiden knew fundamentally that if he did nothing, she would drink her coffee, read her book, and eventually leave, becoming just another pretty ghost in the long, disappointing narrative of his day. But now that she was here, filling the space of his unwritten chapter, he could let reality dictate the ending. Aiden closed his eyes to concentrate. The laptop vanished, the cafe noise faded, and a scene began to play. The silence was deafening, the air thick with the smell of scorched earth and ozone. The cold bit at his face as debris crunched beneath his boots. They weren't in a cafe anymore. They were standing in the wreckage of a forgotten library. He was Aiden, the lone archivist protecting the last copy of human history. She was Mary, a high-ranking officer in the opposing coalition forces sent to retrieve the artifact by force. He moved first, grabbing a broken piece of railing, but she didn't draw her sidearm. Instead, Mary stepped forward, her brown eyes, the same ones from the cafe, soft with disappointment. I know why you're here, Aiden, she whispered, but I also know why you won't hurt me. He dropped the railing. Yeah? How? A faint, familiar scent, vanilla and coffee, wafted from her tunic as she closed the distance between them. I know this, Mary said, gently taking his hand. I know you write stories about fated encounters because you desperately want to believe in them. I know you just saw me walk into that coffee shop, and instead of taking a chance, you wrote me into a war. He stared at her, the walls of the fantasy crumbling around him. So what happens now? She smiled. Now, she said, pulling him close, we choose a different story. Aiden blinked. The library and the war vanished. He was back at his table. The beautiful brunette was still there, quietly turning a page in her book, her coffee cooling beside her. He hadn't typed a single word. He hadn't moved, but the block was gone. He knew what the next scene was. He just had to decide if he was brave enough to write it in fiction or in reality. He closed the laptop, slid his chair back, and started walking toward her table, feeling Optimus Fine. Please consider subscribing and leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you.